Hello and a warm Collisions YYC. Welcome to my guest this morning, Mr. Jared Marley. How are you doing, Jared?
Hey, great, Tyler. Happy morning to you. We're in a lovely fall day, kind of early autumn this year, so I'm enjoying it.
It is beautiful. I do find that fall, well, let's not get into a conversation on climate change and where it's coming from, but I do find the weather in Calgary is getting slightly better. That's all I'm going to say. I don't. That's a very charged topic.
One thing I've learned in Calgary in the last couple of years is, I never complain when it rains or snows. I've been happy with the amount of precipitation we've had this year. It's been really nice to kind of feels like maybe we're out of this drought cycle. I hope. I don't know for sure, but
that would be, yes, I agree. A little bit more green, I think, keeps everybody in a better mood. You are Director of Business Development at Margo Supplies. So let's not waste any time. What is a Margo Supplies? Let us into the tent, Jared. What do you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Margo Supplies, we're a wildlife technology company in southern Alberta with an R&D office in Calgary. So what we do is we specialize in creating innovative products to help manage or solve human-wildlife conflict, as well as aid in conservation and scientific study of wildlife. So our products range anywhere from wildlife tracking collars that are going to be sending remote positions of animals, uploading them through satellites, getting live positions, to electric fences that are used to help keep bears away from attractants or keep communities safe and wildlife safe. Really, our mission is to use technology to balance coexistence of people and wildlife and reducing human-wildlife conflict. So yeah, we sell design tools that help individuals and wildlife professionals meet their operational needs and mitigate at least some of the damage to wildlife that we cause through either our own residential, recreational, industrial uses of the land.
I appreciate the balance between the human-wildlife conflict, and I think you and I joked kind of nursery rhymes, the big bad wolf, like it's been going on since the beginning of time as humans push more into what is the animal's backyard, not the other way around. To be clear, I think sometimes as humans, we mix that up. Oh, the animal's in my backyard. I'm like, just remember it was their backyard first, but that's my own bias around that. But I really like the scientific research aspect of the business. Is that always, because the business has been around for quite a while. Like did one lead the other? Just curious of the balance of those two offerings.
Yeah, so business was founded in 1980 by my parents, Jeff and Margo Marley. I've been working at it professionally for the past 10 years, but I've really spent my whole life
nice.
in and around.
Family business too. Oh, that's cool. That's great.
Exactly, yeah. So second generation. It was a lot of just kind of the background and coincidental parts of the time. My parents came from an agricultural background. So first, when they moved out west, some of the products that they used to deal with on the farm in Ontario weren't really available in the West. So they started working on that. That was a lot of bird mitigation. So right there, it went to the kind of conflict side of it. And then from there, it's expanded based on kind of the species, the challenges at the time, all sorts of different ecological and human factors that go into play. We got involved in bears relatively early in the company's history. And through mentorship and guidance and kind of cooperatively working with biologists and wildlife managers, our business has really been on the side of and informed by the scientific knowledge of wildlife that we acquire. We really do kind of have that science-based approach. That's where most of our customers lie on the spectrum, and of course where the practical trickle-down effects are. Although you kind of mentioned talking about, well, it was wildlife's backyard first, now it's our backyard. I mean, that's one way to think about it. It's not the only way to think about it.
Okay.
We can get in all sorts of, philosophical discussions on it, but the idea that there's wildlife in humans is pretty European thought. The reality is that Europeans and First Nations, anyone really, we're all products of our environment. Humans have co-evolved next to wildlife. So the idea that, there is a human and a natural world is not that reflected in reality, even in the modern world. So there's something to keep in mind too. I try and think about that a little more often. Like you say, these challenges living in the world has been something that we've had our whole, natural history as a species.
I really like your potential. Yeah. Thank you for that counterpoint of like, oh, we're in their backyard, but the idea of coexistence. And I think my tendency to lean to that pushback is so many people have like treated as they treat them as pests, they treat them as annoyance, they treat them as somehow the animals invading their property. I love the coexist concept. of, they were here first. But you're right. The coexistent is a much more balanced way to think about it. It feels sometimes, and maybe it's just the media, and of course I'm picking up on the signals that get put out there, of it's this anti-animal, we need to get rid of them all so they don't bother us kind of mindset, which is the opposite of coexist, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's kind of an impossible task, right? How
Yes.
we talk about, okay, we can't coexist with this one animal. It's a bad animal. We don't want it. Wolves are a classic example of that. And fine, and they've been extirpated from a lot of their range, even in North America. And the result of that, of course, is coyotes fill that same ecological niche,
Yes.
and then come in. And now, of course, some people are worried about coyotes. So it, like you say, it's a story as old as time. There's no really beginning or end to it. And like you said, one of the challenges beyond the fact that thinking is not necessarily backed by science,
Okay.
that there's bad animals or bad species. They're certainly animals that are challenging to live with, more challenging than others, but there's never really any end to it. And at the end of the day, these systems work by having food availability. So the
Yes.
idea that we'd remove a challenging animal, it's just that resource is gonna be used by something else, typically another animal, maybe something that's worse. I can give you kind of all sorts of anecdotes about that, and it happens pretty frequently.
I
Um,
really, I really appreciate that perspective. When you talk about, even your family's journey, starting from looking at bird mitigation around bird management, then quickly evolving to bears, the more risky it becomes for humans, typically the more it gets pushed up. Like a bear is a scary thing. You hear a bear attack, you don't hear about a bird attack, but you hear about bird strikes. Obviously, the crash in the Hudson River, that was a bird strike not long ago. There's a huge narrative around that. So when you look at Alberta specifically, how is there like a top, does it work down a list? Is there like, okay, these are the primary areas we focus on, which is maybe let's just pick bird
yeah.
management around aerodromes. And then obviously bears this time of year tend to find its way into media. How does it kind of stack rank in terms of the amount of work you do? And it's hard not as a human to gravitate towards the bears because it's big and it's scary and it's
Yeah.
this thing, right? That, a bird, come on, it's not that, but a bird can take down an airliner.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly that. Like you say, bird strike hazards, definitely part of our business. Working aerodromes across North America, the world, really. A lot of it was designed to an extent with both Alberta, or at least Western airports, where we've done some of the research
Okay.
on it. Um, yeah, we're again, our kind of as a business, we're obviously gravitating and working on real work. That's going to be where animals have an impact to humans. Like you say, birds are a huge area of what we call human wildlife conflict in the country. That's going to be a lot of agribusiness as well as aviation. For our business, it depends year by year. The funny thing about wildlife, of course, is one
Okay.
year the phone's melting because migration happened 2 weeks earlier, and as a result, some crop hasn't been pulled off in one region, and so there's all sorts of
Oh,
challenges.
I see.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
next year, it's a slow year. Whatever timing changes doesn't coexist or coincide with a lot of human operations, and it's a crazy bear year. So it really varies year by year. This year in Alberta, of course, bears are definitely, I would say, the topic of conversation in general. We've been quite busy. A lot of the bear stuff, and it's fun to talk about, so I'm happy to do it. We've been
Okay.
doing a lot more in BC currently. We're still certainly working in Alberta, but more on just kind of a project basis as opposed to these bigger engagements that we do from time to time. But yeah, bears are endlessly controversial, interesting, and there's certainly large carnivores in general are part of our work. Again, as you say, we see bears, either fascinated by them to one degree, whether that's being worried or angry or afraid. I mean, or in love with bears, but we're fascinated by them for sure. And I think the
They
larger
are
the
fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, the word is, I don't know if you've heard this one before, but it's charismatic megafauna, which is a fun word.
I have not heard that. I love that. Charismatic megafauna.
Yeah, so that's, your lions, elephants, bears, your big species that humans are just very interested in general and large.
Megafauna. Oh yeah, and again, Disney. They've been animated. My wife
Sure.
sent me bear video from the U.S. the other day where it was just he decided to make a bed in front of a trail cam, and he was stretching and rolling. Like it was so endearing. Like you couldn't help but fall in love with the guy or guy or gal, or just chose to have his nap in front of a trail cam.
Yeah, yeah, that connection is funny, and we're seeing more of it too. I mean, there's a lot of trail cameras out. There's all sorts of interesting behaviors that's being captured. That's a cool bit of technology. It's not our wildlife technology. It's been
Okay.
well done and developed. We do a little bit of work on some trail camera images that's kind of going to be ongoing. But yeah, it's cool to see the window we have into the natural world through technology is pretty incredible these days.
Hmm. Well, it makes it less. It's harder to vilify when you see those characteristics, and they're charismatic. What a great use of that word, and I've never heard those two put together. So talk to me. Let's play around with you guys are the experts. You get these calls all the time. I'm assuming it starts with education. How do we educate people on what to do? Like, don't leave food out, like things we've all heard, and then right up to putting up an electric fence. So take us on a bit of a journey. You get a phone call, and let's say it's even a large ag operation or a large industrial engagement, but it's in the bush and it's in bear country, and they're like, shit, we're having bear issues. Mm-hmm. Where does this start? Where does this start for you guys? Like, I like almost real to practical, but give us a real life scenario how you'd answer that call, which I'm sure you get on a regular basis.
Yeah, definitely. A little less me these days. I'm not on the front lines of the phone as often as I used to be.
But you're familiar. You've been there, I'm quite sure.
Oh yeah, many years. The first thing is just trying to get the questions I'm really keyed in on. As much as we've just had a good conversation, I'm sure we'll keep talking about wildlife and science and how things work. I need to know budgets. Do you have $100 problem? Do you have a $2,000 problem? Do you have, an endangered species on site that's going to shut down operations, right? It's all scalable. Wildlife is unpredictable. There's tons of variables. And so there's never any going to be 100%. We've just solved the problem. We've built an interchange and traffic problems have been solved. Same thing. It doesn't work that way in the world.
No, it does not.
What's the scale of the problem? What's the real impact to you? What is the client's appetite to things? From there, of course, we need to learn a little more specifics. Kind of the second goal on the practical side is, obviously what animal it is, where it is, some logistical considerations, but what's driving the challenge? What's driving the problem? It's often attractants, especially when we're talking about the bear world. So, okay, you got an industrial client, they've got bears on site and it's a problem, for sure. Impacting operations, safety hazard to themselves. Maybe it's grizzly bears, there's adds in a bunch of regulations. Then at that point, it might be permitting requirements. Why are there an animal on site? And there's always a reason for it, and it's often food, and it's often cheap and easily available food. So hammering into the attractant, we talk about deterrence a little bit, and that's definitely part of our work, especially when we talk about bears or carnivores. You can only deter an animal to a point. You really need to get to the root source. As you kind of led into the question, one of our big areas of operations, and I would say probably one of the areas where we've had at least the most public impact is electric fencing for carnivores, especially bears, or predators, I should say. Bears aren't exactly carnivores, but that goes into a whole different set of weeds. So
bears are opportunists when it comes to food. Maybe is a better way to say.
Yeah, and I mean it varies a lot. I was just talking as a funny little tidbit. There's apparently about 30-ish brown bears that live in the Gobi Desert on the Chinese-Mongolian border, and they're the same species as our grizzly bears. It's one species. Europe, North America, they're all brown bears. Subspecies or subpopulation, depending on your definition. Anyway, they only eat veggies, so they don't get very big too. But yeah, exactly. We're going down a rabbit hole on this one. Bear diets.
The adaptability of nature is a phenomenon unto itself, right? They adapt to the environments they're in. That happens slowly over time, and gradually their systems be able to derive enough nutrients. But you're right, they don't grow as big as they do here, maybe without access to meat. That's a much deeper, bigger conversation.
Exactly. Well, outside of business and
yes,
in
100%.
The West.
This is where Jared and Tyler just get curious and go down a rabbit hole. But
yeah, sure, we can do that.
But that's so interesting as you're understanding. So, electric fences. Obviously, I grew up in a rural environment. Many a cattle field had an electric fence. It was a deterrent from me when I was 6. I think we've all learned the electric fence lesson. I'm assuming the bear learns that lesson pretty quickly as well, without causing any permanent harm to the bear.
I mean, I don't have to answer the question. You just gave me the perfect analogy. You should, in fact, we've got a sales position open right now, Tyler. So maybe that's that's what I would say on the phone too. Yeah, exactly like you say. So it's electric fencing. They work very similar to a cattle fence. So we don't have a magic button on how to communicate with bears. We're using a small pain stimulus. It hurts a little bit. It doesn't hurt that long. Bears try and get to an attractant. They get shocked. It's an unpleasant experience. Ideally, and if you get them hard enough the first time, they really don't even check again. Just your analogy, just like you and I touched an electric fence when I was a kid too, and I'm pretty careful in the shop to not shock myself. I didn't like it then. I don't like it now. And
No, it sucks.
bears are the
It
same
totally
way.
sucks. Yeah.
So it's delivering an effective, strong shock to a bear, the kind of shock that's going to stop it from trying to physically breach the fence, go over, under, or through it, and get to that tractant. Your ideal is that bear just no longer has that food source as something accessible to it on the landscape and goes back to whatever it was eating before that or should be eating.
And the year, the type of crops, the type of amount of moisture we have, how much of a food deficit is out there, which can really motivate these animals because they've got to bulk up. They're going to go to sleep for X amount of months.
Yeah.
They are now consuming. We were joking offline. We all know wasps are assholes. Let's just call a spade a spade. This has been a horrendous year.
Yeah.
But now I'm finding holes all over our property where I didn't know there was underground wasp nests all dug up. And then 10 feet away, there's bear scat. So someone's like, oh, it could be a bear, it could be a skunk. I'm like, yeah, but the bear scat 10 feet away is a dead giveaway that's full of oats from my neighbor's oat field that he's doing for his cattle. So you can kind of watch the bear just being an opportunist, getting as many calories as he or she can.
Yeah. I mean, I often say, if you had 8 months a year, 6 to 8 months a year to eat, you'd be pretty hungry too.
It's like intermittent fasting. You can only eat for 6 hours a day. Most of my friends who do that, they eat as much as they can in that 6 hour period.
Yeah. I've never tried that because I know I'd have that same response.
Yeah, no, I would not. I would just doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. I need to have access to food, but I appreciate the bear's motivation. I have respect for that. You're hungry and you're prepping.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of to an extent fascinating that we have as few conflicts as we do actually when it comes to bears. They're pretty remarkably tolerant species overall. I wouldn't, people may not agree with that statement. It depends a little bit on species too, although they mostly interact with humans in the same way. For black bears, I think that's something like over 1 million black bears in North America these days, which might be stunning. And it's really a success story. And they're living largely without substantial conflict or impact to either species. They're doing pretty well.
You hear very few stories about a vicious black bear attack. Like any of my friends who've run into, I've seen them driving by. We've seen them on our trail cams. I've never run into one. It's so funny. I thought I ran into one yesterday morning. As I crept over a hill, I just saw this black mass, and then I realized it was my neighbor's cow. So that was a very anticlimactic. But that second of like, oh shit, is like, and it was in the corner of the oat field. So in your mind, that's a bear. And then I peek around again. I'm like, no, that's a cow. But anyways, that was a slightly humbling but funny moment. I think you're better to think that it is a bear than not think it is and go running over to pet the cow. But
that's fair. I think in a general
I've always
thing,
heard they just run away. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not sure what it is, don't run up and pet it. Is a pretty good analogy.
I know
to
enough
live
about
life.
nature to avoid doing something that stupid.
Exactly. But it's interesting what you talk about. I mean, and you can get in the weeds a little bit with black bears. So with black bears, although negative encounters are what you would call encounters with contact, where bears actually touch a human, anywhere from a swat to a bite to a full attack. Black bears, tiny, considering the amount of black bears in people and the overlap between the two. About 2/3 of black bear attacks on humans are predatory. And 1/3 defensive. And with grizzly bears, it's roughly swapped, with about 1/3 of grizzly bear attacks on humans are predatory and about 2/3 are defensive. So kind of interesting too. There's definitely more instances of negative interactions with grizzly bears when you compare the population sizes to black bears. But yeah, black bears win in the very rare instance there is a bad encounter with the black bear. It's a little more possible to be a predatory incident.
Interesting. Again, until you know the stats, you don't really know what's going on.
Yeah. And that changes too.
Yeah. By the year, by the geography, by the, I think I was out in Panorama, and there's literally black bears run down the side of the road as you're driving through town. It's hilarious. And everyone just like stays clear, but they seem to do their thing. And everyone has a bear sculpture everywhere because it's just like, and they're they're small and they just zip around like oversized dogs. And I'm like, wow, this is strangely comfortable. And people were walking and they just stayed back. The bear passed through and that was the end of it. I found quite interesting. Thoughts, and this is where we might be branching out of your area of expertise, which I appreciate. Some changes in the grizzly bear legislation, and I know a little bit more open.
I was hoping you were going to ask this question.
Yeah, that was a big thing that happened back in the spring, and I don't know if I know enough to even have a point of view. So clearly, it sounds like you do. So please, thoughts. Maybe give us for anyone listening, give us a little bit on kind of maybe what the change was, and kind of what's your thoughts on it, and maybe the impact you've seen or haven't seen.
Great. Okay. Well, just throw me a little easy softball question, about grizzly bear hunting in Alberta.
Jared, we're 19 minutes in. Like, I thought we set the foundation. We're feeling good about this conversation.
That's right. Okay, well, no, this will be good. This is a good chance to alienate some of my customer base. No, I shouldn't say that. I feel pretty safe in saying this. It really is, frankly, ridiculous. The Minister Loewen's decision is what we're talking about, to have what's called a wildlife responders tag. The idea being, and you can kind of see the logic, and I think this goes into understanding the practicalities of wildlife a little better. So the logic is that there are a certain number of grizzly bears that the province destroys in a year due to conflict. Grizzly bears and bears in general, when they get on human food, typically it is a one-way street, and it often ends in either a danger to the human or preemptive destruction. It doesn't happen a ton in Alberta when you get to the actual destruction numbers, which is also part of the reason why this procedure, I think, has some real major flaws in it. But the logic behind it is let's not waste these animals. We're just shooting them, euthanizing these animals. Why can't that be a hunting opportunity? As a lot of listeners will know, hunting of grizzly bears was banned some years back now.
Yeah, 20
recently,
plus 20, 30 years ago, right?
I think maybe a little less than that. It was within
I thought it was mid-'80s or something, but I couldn't remember.
No, I don't think so. I think it was.
Okay, later. Okay.
We'll get fact checked on this, maybe.
I'm gonna Google it while we're chatting. I have another monitor here.
So anyway, that's the logic behind it. The thing is, and it's never, this idea isn't new to Alberta. It's never been implemented successfully, to my knowledge. The idea that you get hunters to kind of do problem wildlife control, it's been used in black bears in the U.S. in various states. And the analysis that I've read on it in the literature is that it sort of works in that it reduces conflict by a total reduction of bear population. Less bears, to an extent, less conflict. Fair enough. Grizzly bears do teach their offspring. So sows do teach their cubs. So what you would call human conflict or problem behavior in a grizzly bear sow is often passed on to its offspring. So there's another thought that,
interesting.
Keep the bears that are doing bear things alive and wild and kind of intercept and prevent that passing of knowledge. Where I think this decision falls apart is on the practicalities and why. So the minister's talked about up to 20 animals a year. I don't think that's typically true. And again, this is a fact checking. It's often between 3 to 10-ish grizzly bears that are destroyed in a year. So one, it's not as many as has been said. That might be peakier numbers. Two, the decision to destroy or to euthanize, kill, whatever language you prefer, an animal that's an endangered species, it's not one that's taken lightly. It often happens because there's a real need and a real threat to human safety. And the idea that we're going to wait up to 24 hours for a wildlife responder to come and deal with this presumably imminent threat, there's liability questions that I have on that. There's problems with private land access. So a wildlife first responder tag, what if they lose this problem bear? How do they ID it? Do they have a CO with them? I think some of these are just starting to be published now. There has been the tag. How does it work in practical effects? And then my final question is also why? I mean, I don't have a problem with hunting. I'm kind of open to hunting whatever species is scientifically justified by its population.
Yeah.
But, grizzly bear hunting is often justified because of the fantastic funding opportunities for the value of their tags. And if we're talking about a very limited number of bears, we're not talking about out-of-province tags for the most part, which are the real revenue generators. To me, it raises the question why aren't professionals handling this? We'll see how it plays out. It's an interesting one. The other thing that's kind of interesting is with this same program and a little less published by the news has been elk as well. So there's a problem wildlife responder tag now issued for elk. There's a lot of elk conflict that's happening. There's huge elk herds too. And I can kind of see the merits of that, even more the case. Kind of what I think is interesting is there's a direct relation between these two species, elk and grizzly bears. In Yellowstone, for example, grizzly bears kill 50% of elk neonates. There's not that as many elk. Okay, fair enough. So it's kind of interesting to see this tag exist for two species that are pretty directly related. Stands to reason. You have a few more bears, you possibly have less elk, so that's one solution anyway. But yeah, as far as the practicalities go, and I think the entire, for the most part, most of the professional community has had more or less this opinion. Why this doesn't really make sense? Are we just trying to find a socially acceptable? What's really happening is, of course, is that there's personal interest to an extent. Minister Loewen, of course, is a hunting guide, pro hunting. Again, I'm fairly pro hunting myself, but I feel like this is just trying to create an opportunity to hunt a species that was the only politically expedient way to do it, and then to shoehorn a program into the political objectives. So, yeah. Do I think that's a good idea? No. Do I think, shoehorning practical, reasonable steps into any kind of politically expedient objective, rather than working the other way is a good idea? Not really. It's not how I prefer to see governance done. So that's kind of my thought. No, I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think it'll work very well. I think the few instances where it's even a possibility, there's some real practical problems. And again, I didn't think about the liability here. Are we going to expect a wildlife professional not euthanize an animal when they have an opportunity and wait for a non-vetted person to travel there, come in, try and track down the animal and remove it, not accounting for all sorts of other laws that they have to follow, such as land access requirements, discharge? You can't have a member of public shooting a bear really in an unsafe area, in a place where firearms aren't legal to discharge. So there's all sorts of challenges with it, and I don't know if it's going to be solved or not. But the jury's out to an extent. It hasn't worked before in any jurisdiction that I'm aware of.
Yeah, interesting. Jared, I'm really glad I asked you. This seems like
I know, it's good. Let's get some people.
Jared's like, I'm going to roll up my sleeves. So 2006. So you're absolutely accurate. I was incorrect. Grizzly bear hunting was banned in Alberta since 2006. So 100%. I didn't realize it was that. It just feels so recent. It felt like something that's been around for a long time. And then I stumbled on another article that's literally like, someone said, about 20 grizzly bears are killed per year. And then the counter is like, well, no, there's no statistics to prove that there was only 25 killed from like 2010 to 2022. So it's interesting when you like the debate of like, well, how many are we actually talking about and how many have been euthanized or had to be destroyed because of human interaction? And this they're like, we don't know where this 25 a year came from. It actually seems ridiculously high compared to what statistically is known. So it's interesting how this article itself is lobbing back and forth between who's sharing what stat and why are they sharing it.
Yeah, sure.
What's the motivation behind this? That's the funny thing about statistics. So, you can bend them to your will at time.
Exactly.
If you're working with an industrial operator, they're maybe northern, northwestern Alberta or even BC, and they're frustrated, they're trying to get work done. I'm just picturing the environment and they're like, can't we just shoot it? Like, that's a bit of the human, like, well, shit, this bear's impeding us. It's causing problems. We're out in the middle of nowhere. Just get the gun, versus the companies that go, hey, no, we want to invest in the electric fence. Like, cause I think where to invest is key. A couple dollars on a bullet is not expensive, where the price of doing it in a different, more humane way often is more expensive. And is that a dialogue you guys get into, or is the companies that call you the ones that already believe in doing it this other way?
You know what? There's many questions in there, and I got to start writing down your questions so I can go through each piece of it.
Sorry, it's a stream of consciousness, Jared.
We're going right into it. I like it. To be honest, that attitude in the industrial side is not common at all these days, and hasn't been for some time. Funny enough, there's a ton of oil and gas regulation in particular, but other industries as well. I think one thing Alberta does a decent job of is its oil and gas, and Canada too does a good job of is oil and gas regulation. One, it's not something that the regulations either permit or encourage. It's kind of a last resort for the most part. Number two, it's bad optics, of course. And number three, it's just not part of the industrial dialogue really, and hasn't been for years. I remember I was in the Yukon at a gold thing, like a workshop for gold miners in Dawson City. And so gold mining in the Yukon is a little different than in BC and Alberta. It's placer mining, so it's basically individuals, small operations. And even there, I didn't have a single person talk to me and say, yeah, no, I'll just shoot them. And that was now nearly 10 years ago with kind of the, quote unquote, kind of cowboy of industrial operations, let alone large companies. That part's not common. I think where anyone can have an improvement on is, we're not at that typically just shoot as a response for the most part. And there are options where there are times when that's the only realistic solution, but that's not typically the response. But making sure that the attractant management, that their programs are in place when you're dealing with bigger sites, that the biology is done well, that the planning is done well, that wildlife has been factored into the entire operations. That's where a lot more of the industrial challenges is at the moment. You know, conflicting goals, right? One side of it needs to, I don't know, maybe make some barrier or buffer that turns out to have overturned a bunch of ground squirrels, and now that's an attractant. It's funny that that seems like a small thing, but little things like that do happen to wildlife. And I'm just picking one example out. Or we need we need some decentralized food solutions for workers because it's one site and you can't have everyone come back to the lunchroom. So now there's food garbage. Those are kind of the challenges that industry tends to deal with more these days, and that's kind of goes into the practical wildlife coexistence and business side of it. As far as I guess the final point of yours I wanted to address, and I think that's why private business has a place. We started electric fencing for bears with Saskatchewan beekeepers, actually. And so what it was is the province was spending a lot of money, this was back in the 80s, on crop insurance for damage to beehives from industrial beekeepers. And the province started a program, and this kind of goes back really to the origins of that kind of science-based side of our business, started a program to try and proactively deal with this. So they would subsidize electric fencing to proactively stop damage rather than pay for the effects of it. The beekeepers kept buying electric fences, and it certainly wasn't because they loved bears. It was because it was cheap insurance.
Yep, and it worked. It worked.
In an ideal world, that's what we would be selling as cheap insurance. Of course, a lot of our customers call us the day after they needed us. But exactly right. Whatever the case may be, whether it's actually the cost of the damage an animal could cause themselves, the regulatory costs, being fined because you've done a poor job at following the regulations, your public profile, your share price, even if it's a big public news event, that's what drives investment on the industrial side into conflict mitigation, and I'm happy it does. It's solutions take time and effort to develop. There needs to be a market for them.
Have you seen a movement in the last few years with so many more companies? We'll talk about the energy sector in Alberta. ESG reporting. Here's what we're doing to mitigate a variety of things. I would imagine this would fall squarely, well, not imagine, it would fall squarely in that paradigm of, hey, let's demonstrate to our investors, our shareholders, the things we're doing, more on the E side in terms of the environment that we work in. This to me is a no-brainer to find at least a page or two in the ESG report.
Probably so. And, I'm very much on the small business side. I work with bigger companies, but I haven't had to write an ESG report. I actually, hopefully in my business career, don't have to. Not because I don't believe
I expect you're going to get that call, Jared. You're going to get the call like, hey, we need to include this in. Can you give us these stats?
I'm sure it's going to be, and I listened to your podcast, and I think that was actually one of your questions when you were talking to a person who is designing ESG software, as the small coffee shop that now has another piece of paper.
Exactly my question. When mandatory reporting comes in the next couple of years.
Ask any small business owner how they feel about another report from their bank or the province or some random agency that comes across their desk and needs to be done the next day. I haven't seen a ton of it communicated. There's been a little bit of it. I think the challenge is that these are pretty challenging things to quantify. How do you say how many bears didn't we impact this year is a difficult stat to pull up. And to an extent, I think with industry, the storytelling aspect, I know you would, and I'm in the similar mindset, see this as an opportunity, right? Hey, let's tell a story about what we're doing to make sure our operations are a good, sustainable source of whatever fuel. Wildlife is inherently controversial. I don't know anything that almost everybody has an opinion on wildlife without necessarily spending any resources, either financial, time, learning, really to back up those opinions to an extent. For example, we all have opinions on healthcare, and we spend phenomenal
amounts with uninformed opinions, Jared? What?
Sure, exactly. But healthcare, we spend trillions of dollars on healthcare per year, solving these problems. Wildlife, we all talk about it. It makes the news. How much do we really spend in wildlife? So
That's a
There
fair point.
is that part of it, and I think on the side of it, and why it doesn't always get in the reporting, is that wildlife is so controversial that I think there's generally a fear that by telling these stories, you'll bring out the negative side of that. As many people say, oh, look how I get it. This company needed to, disturb the soil to get at a resource. And look at all the phenomenal work they've done to try and minimize that impact. As many people are just going to see, look at the hole they've dug in the ground,
Yeah.
not the steps they took to make sure that that was reasonable, that is truly a driver of our economy, that it was necessary and a good thing overall, and the impacts were minimized. So I think there's some challenges on the communication. Industry, of course, is just also challenging. Like these problems often happen at the operational level, and I actually get most excited by the operational level of challenges.
Hmm.
To make its way up the chain takes time, gets lost in translation often as well. But it is a good question. And how does the wildlife itself end up on the ESG? Really tricky stuff. We talk so much about carbon, and to an extent we can measure carbon. Measuring wildlife impacts gets in again to the
Yeah,
science that may not
it's a
have the
good
budget
point.
even to exist.
And you're measuring. It's hard to measure the harm you didn't do when you didn't do it.
Sure. Yeah,
Like to
exactly.
your point,
Exactly.
like, hey, we didn't have to euthanize X. Well, why were you planning to? Like, it's a weird
Yeah, yeah,
dichotomy
yeah,
of
yeah.
how that
So
creates. Yeah.
it's tricky, and it's all part of it. It's all part of trying to keep a somewhat intact environment while enabling economic growth and diversity.
Yeah.
Um,
That is the balance, right? And that's become exceptionally polarized in the last handful of years.
totally. Yeah, we all know about
To be,
greenhouse gases, and it's
yeah.
common, and it's mostly talked about in the corporate world. We talk a little bit less about diversity and ESG. What is biological diversity? What about intact ecosystems,
Mhm.
connectivity? Um, Carbon capture is great. There's lots of other ways to capture carbon. Native grasslands do a really good job of that as one
They do.
example. So you can kind
It's
of
a
go down the
broad,
list, and
yeah.
and this is I'm on the technology side. I really like the devices and the embedded systems. So, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But
Well, I was
for
just
how
going to
does
pivot.
this
Yeah.
exactly? But how does it get
Into the,
reported? Bigger brains than me have to solve that.
okay. Which I appreciate that. I just, yeah, as a business, anyone can third party go to overseas, buy a piece of equipment, resell it into a market where the background with your scientific research and the partnerships and the understanding, what device do we need? What data does it need to provide? Like that must be, and maybe that sounds like maybe a little bit your area, that we'll call it the geek out corner in a good way,
Yeah, good.
about the scientific side of your business takes you guys away from just being basically a third party reseller. I buy something overseas, I bring it, I put up my sticker on it and I sell it. But as soon as you add in no, we're part of the research community, and because they have specific needs, we need to do this study, we need to capture this data. How much is that a big part of your business? And I can only imagine it's driving your value proposition of just, more, you learn more, you get
Yeah.
closer to it, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly right. I get really excited myself, and where the projects I work directly on are ones where I see a potential to either develop a new technology or improve on one, improve on our offerings in one way or another. And so, researchers, academic institutions, government agencies are not necessarily going to be the giant, the huge drivers of revenue, depending on the product to an extent. But what they do offer is to get really verifiable, good information, good solid feedback that we can then say to another customer, no, we're confident it works. This is why we know it works. It's been studied in this. This is how it actually um, functions. That value is immense, and that's something I really enjoy doing. And so you do that. We do that in a few ways. Wildlife is only a small, real part of our business at the end of the day,
Okay.
or in the day to day. I mean, it's all wildlife products, but my day to day, a lot of it more is weatherproofing testing, durability. How does this function? Do the instructions work? Is this shipped in a way that gets to a customer and they can easily set it up and deploy it properly, use it correctly? So one of the things that's great about Alberta is it's a pretty demanding environment, especially northern Alberta. We have awful weather at times,
Well,
and so
plus 35 this summer and minus 40 in the winter.
exactly right. I've said that. You're stealing all my lines. That's one of the ones I use. I don't know many places in the world that have as extreme temperature changes. So I love setting stuff up to northern Alberta because if there's a way to break it, it will break in that environment.
Yeah.
Uh, and then if it works there, great. We can sell it, use it elsewhere, promote it elsewhere. So that's one area that's a lot of fun. I've been having a lot of fun too on these tracking collars that we've been working on for the past many years. It's been our most ambitious R&D project to date, and so we're building satellite wildlife tracking collars. It's been very fascinating. It's been cool for me to get a little window on wildlife behavior. I'm not as bad as I used to be, but I used to be, refreshing my data all the time, just checking in on one of my test animals.
That's
What's it up
awesome.
to? We had a little orphaned black bear cub that was our first black bear trial last year, and it was in the southeast of the U.S. And so I was always clicking on it, seeing if he was getting into trouble or not. So that's been a lot of fun. So I particularly enjoy engaging in the scientific community, and again, I kind of do it informed by the science, by the practical stuff that works. But yeah, we want to sell products that work. I can tell you here kind of, this pen I have is the best bear deterrent in the world. Right? Do you see any bears around? No. Well, it must work. And you laugh, but it's true.
That was well done. That was great. Yeah,
And,
but
and so companies sell,
that's
like we've
sloppy.
had
There's
some
broken
crazy
science
ideas.
for you right there. Yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
One of a better selling bird deterrent is a product that makes ultrasonic sound so it doesn't disturb humans. Almost every species of birds, with the exception of owls, has a narrower hearing range than us.
Hmm.
So
I
it
appreciate
happens.
that.
You want to be able to
Yeah.
have that confidence to say, we've actually studied this. We're not selling BS. We're selling things that are going to work
We're
for
not
you.
selling magic beans in a box. A couple of things I loved. I love what you said about thinking about the customer. Like what I hear is customer experience. Does it work? Is it easy to set up? What comes in the box? Do I understand it? I'm out in the field. I'm on the tail door of my truck. I open this box and I'm like, ugh, I don't know what to do with this thing. It doesn't work. Doesn't connect. Doesn't charge up. Whatever the case may be. And it might be minus 30 or it might be plus 30. The other side of it, do you typically, we're getting involved with satellite tracking and doing these R&D projects? Are you partnering with universities? Are you partnering with governments? Are you doing this solo? Like just thinking about like the undertaking of an organization, like a private business doing that can be expensive. There can be lots of doors to open. Do you typically do it in partnership with?
Yes, to an extent. I think the magic sauce in the business, the kind of real secret stuff, is how to do this affordably with budgets and do it in a way, for me at least, that maintains our independence as a company. That's the value I see. And how do we do it? Well, there's some secret sauce that comes with being in the business for 44 years, being really efficient in our time. We have a really small R&D team for the projects we take on. It's most people probably wouldn't advise it. But it's saving time by having that institutional knowledge, by having these networks and connections, our ability to call someone I know and say, hey, I got this other challenge. We had a bear fence in Northeast BC. It's the Liard River Hot Springs, actually. And so we fenced this. It was a real good job. It took a lot of effort. But one of the challenges is that bison, it turns out, were pretty motivated to get in the campground. The fence was for bears, but it was bison that wanted to go in. So, you could go down this process of public tendering, commissioning a study, et cetera, and finally get to an answer on how do you have a multi-species exclusion fence. Well, we picked up the phone and talked to a few people we knew, and the advice we had on bison, if they can get their nose over the fence, they're going through it. So there was the answer. It had to be taller. And like you say, there's an institutional advantage on any kind of business, and you can really shortcut a lot of stuff that people struggle with. We know, for example, on our products, weatherproofing and power. They just have to work. They have to work always. It's pretty basic stuff, but needs to start at weatherproofing and power, price point, all those kind of things. And you do see it in the environmental world and the environmental technology world, a lot of startups. In our sector, in the last 10 years, I don't think a single startup has made it.
Oh, interesting. Just because the barrier.
Yeah. The barrier, they're solving problems that maybe don't exist.
A technology looking for a problem to solve, one of those situations. Yeah.
Exactly right. The burning customers happens a lot. Selling something that doesn't work, just killing it off the bat. Again, that institutional thing, putting all those things together is what it takes to be successful in this industry.
Where do you see, it sounds to me, I don't want to jump to conclusions. This is just about getting better, getting smarter. Every year you're learning new things, you're doing studies, you're finding better ways to mitigate animals that are incredibly resourceful, incredibly motivated for food, typically. And
sure.
If every day you woke up, you weren't sure where food was going to be, you'd get really good at finding it. And those animals live that every day.
Well, and there's a business connection too. I mean, if your livelihood depends on being able to make sales and make revenue, you get pretty good at it.
Yes.
And
Touche. Well said. Well said.
that's why I think private business has a part to play in these, emerging coexistence, conservation, ecological challenges. What is private business good at? We're good at efficiently solving problems because there really is no other alternative.
Yeah.
Get get smarter or
It
die.
is survival. It is survival every day. It's equally comparative to that motivated animal.
Pretty much. I know. When January comes around, I'm pretty hungry for sales.
Yes,
So
hungry
just like
is
a
actually
bear
the better.
emerging
Yeah, that's the word
for
to
a
use.
den, keeping that going on is key.
And for you guys, it sounds a lot big business, small business. It's all across the board because if you're operating and existing, whether you're a rural farmer or you're a large industrial operator in northern Alberta, this is the universalities. There's animals everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Universalities, there's animals everywhere. And to solve these kind of things or help, because technology is just a tool.
I appreciate that.
Right. To have a productive tool, it needs to work well for the customer. It needs to hit a price point. It needs to be marketed. It needs to be advertised. It needs to be packaged. It needs to conform with a variety of regulations. It needs to arrive where it's needed on time. The wildlife part of my job is certainly one of the more fun. I have a lot of fun on the R&D side myself.
Yeah. But there's just the logistics of operating on a large geographic footprint, often in remote locations, right? Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, exactly. Wildlife challenges don't happen typically, in easy to ship to locations. I just did a fun one.
Not within 20 minutes of the Calgary city center. No, definitely not.
Certainly not. And then having tools that use lithium batteries or all sorts of other goods, you get into regulations really quick as well on that side. So that kind of nuts and bolts stuff. Again, I think business has a real use in our kind of toolkit itself of coexistence challenges, and we've seen really innovative companies come out of Alberta already. I'd like to count ourselves as one of them. I expect we will. There's a lot of reasons for those for successful businesses. Again, it comes to an industry that is generally fairly well regulated, both from allowing the resource to be used as well as trying to mitigate at least some of the damages of using it. That's what I think we do a decent job of.
Are you guys primarily, we talked a lot about Alberta, BC. Do you do business on a more of a larger scale, or is it primarily in Western Canada?
We do business on a global scale.
Okay, awesome.
So cool. We've exported to every continent except for Antarctica, I suppose. We ship and regularly work Canada-wide. We've expanded to the U.S. We've always done business in the U.S. We've formally expanded to the U.S., so almost all of our products in Canada are also offered in the U.S. from our own warehouse that's ready to ship. I expect that to continue. I'm really interested in other areas of the globe as well. I'll make no secret of it. I think kind of the Alberta advantage that I'm looking to exploit is to use this good home ground where there is markets, there is an area of operations that's existed. Like we're talking about, we have horrible weather in northern Alberta and challenging deployment circumstances. And if we can solve it there, it tends to work in lots of other areas of the world.
And do those other areas of the world, did they see that advantage? Like, did they understand it, or is it also just part of educating? I know talking to people in the energy sector, sometimes, Alberta, I've had people that have worked overseas and they're like, oh my God, it was like Alberta 30 years ago. They're, whether it was Albania or somewhere like that. And they do, and there is a recognition that, oh, you're from Alberta in that sector, you have a certain degree of we know how to get quote unquote, get shit done.
Yeah. To an extent, I think because our sector is a little more separate, like energy, everyone knows Alberta and energy.
For sure. Yeah.
It's a little less known for wildlife. I think they indirectly see the benefits of the testing. As far as a marketing point, made in Alberta, it's great for local people to support our business and to have engagement from, like I said, we do a lot of testing in Alberta. So we kind of get it from the reverse. A lot of people locally are interested in helping us or working with us to develop our technology for the export sales to an extent. Where I see it a little bit more is Europe lately. Europe's had a funny thing happen with carnivores. Europe's net human land use largely is decreasing. It varies obviously by country, but less and less land each year is needed to be used for human usage. And so you hear about rewilding as a concept. It's reintroducing animals that have been extirpated from the environment or replacing them if the species is extinct with a next kind of nearest species, or just letting animals come back to land naturally without human intervention. That's happening a lot. So Europe has the world's fastest expanding brown bear population. Romania has possibly upwards of 8,000 brown bears. Again, same species as our grizzly bear. And so they're dealing with these challenges that hasn't existed for them. They extirpated the populations 100 years ago. So there was only lethal control. There was never any coexistence with bears. And now what we're seeing is tools, especially in bears, being used in Europe. Europeans are really used to electric fencing for agriculture. There's been a little bit, they don't really use it for predator exclusion. There's been a little bit on that. Europe until very recently didn't have any supply of bear spray. It wasn't a tool. It's still not legal in many countries in Europe that have a lot of bears. So we are seeing some of the successful tools. It varies a lot by sector that are developed or just common to us that are now being exported to other areas of the world, especially as some other areas of the world are having success with reintroduction of animals, and then of course dealing with the knock-on effects of that.
Oh, that's an interesting statistic. Jared, you are a wealth of knowledge, my friend. I was like, I'd not heard that. That is very interesting.
Thank you. We'll see how active your fact checkers are in your audience. So
to me, that means they're listening. Okay, so now we're at the end. We're getting close to the end. So now I have a personal question, and maybe it's my own. The use of bear spray. I have a lot of friends that go hiking a lot and they take bear spray. They've never used it. They've never deployed it. They don't really understand how it works besides reading the label. But I have bear spray, so therefore, no, I'm good now. I've checked the box. And I believe, yes, as a deterrent, it can be effective. I've trained with it and had a slight blowback and realized how effective that is as a human. I don't know about the bear side of it. But the risk of a false sense of security or also, these same people have never run into a bear or had a bad bear interaction without having trained on it or even knowing how to use the equipment. Is there any chance, and this is my own, you and I having a philosophical conversation here at the end, the risk of a false sense of security of, I have bear spray, so therefore I'm good, versus, hey, avoidance, all the other things really should be my primary, and this is a last resort tool?
Yeah. It is a last resort tool. That's definitely the case. Again, my mind's going with a few different answers to these, so I'll try and keep track of them. So yeah, bear spray is that is what it is. It's not a deterrent. Bear spray isn't something you use when a bear is kind of hanging around a little too close to your cabin. Bear spray is something you use if a bear is looking like it's going to make contact with you. It's charging you, you're surprised each other, whatever happens, that's when you use bear spray. As far as complacency, sure, that's a risk with any technology. My counterpoint to that is, don't wear the seatbelt in your car. Right.
Touche.
Do we drive safer because we have seatbelts? Sure, I'm sure we do to an extent, but it also has a real effect. Bear spray is simple to use. You should practice with it. You really should. My message is, of course, practice with it. You can get inert training cans. These just have water and the
nice.
Okay.
Okay. I didn't know that. Oh, that's cool.
We sell. Visit margosupplies.com to buy your inert training cans.
Nice. Excellent plug. That was well done.
Exactly. Or next year, coming by our Calgary office in the Manchester Industrial Park, we're going to have a Robo Bear, so you can train. If you buy bear spray with us, we'll let you shoot an inert one at a Robo Bear. That's not ready yet. It'll be next spring. So that's one thing to do. Train that. You can buy it. Watch a video at the very least online. One of my main benefits of bear spray, though, to me, is that it works really well. You're pretty safe with it for the most part. It's pretty easy to use. You just pull off a safety device, you press down and spray it. It's like a fire extinguisher. In fact, it uses the similar heads as a fire extinguisher.
While a bear is 20 yards out charging at you.
It gets iffy, but it happens. And there are times, there was last year, somebody, I think it was even in the Waitress, where the bear punctured the can while it was attacking someone and sprayed itself.
I got a mouthful of bear spray.
So, there you go. There's one possible.
Yeah,
that's a low chance one. But what I like about bear spray is that if you have bear spray ready, you know how to use it. You've done that 15 minutes of effort on your side just to make sure it's there. It's within the expiry date. You look at a bear, you pull out your bear spray, and then you go, okay, I'm pretty safe. Bear's over there. What's it doing? Take a second. Figure out what's going on, and then take the next step. That's what I like about bear spray a lot.
Okay.
Without it, you have that tendency to panic. And a lot of times with bear encounters, to be honest with you, you're safe no matter what you do. There's certain bear encounters where you're probably safe no matter what. There's a much smaller percentage of bear encounters where what you do really does matter. You've surprised a bear, it has cubs, your reaction is going to change the outcome of that interaction. And then there's an infinitesimally small situations where a bear is predatory, maybe is going after you, where what you do short of using bear spray or a weapon doesn't matter. Yeah. But most of those, that interaction of say 5% where what you do matters, that's where bear spray is great, because again, you take a second, I'm safe. I know if a bear charges me, I'm not just okay, bye.
Yeah.
I'm safe. I have a recourse. I can look. I can see. Oh, that bear's sitting there. Oh, I see its cubs are over there to the right. Geez, I'm just gonna step over this way. So that's one of the benefits I see in bear spray.
I like it.
That's
It
not
creates a
talked about
moment,
quite
creates
as
a
often.
break, creates a distance, and creates a pause versus versus a panic. Because you obviously the news loves to exaggerate the predatory situations that you do hear about, where
Yeah.
a woman walking not far from us a couple of years ago walks the same trail every morning, and a grizzly bear comes out of the side trail and jumps her, and you hear those stories. But I like what you said. That training to pause, training to think and be
Hmm.
proactive in that moment, because what you do does have an impact on the next on the outcome or the next thing that happens. And my argument is, if you don't train for that, what you will do under stress, you actually don't know. You
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
really
that's
know
right
what
too.
you're going to do. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
You
And I
might
mean,
need a
bears cover
fresh
ground
pair of
fast.
pants. Yeah.
Bears
Yes.
cover ground fast for
Yeah.
sure.
I watched a bunch
What?
of bear spray videos last year, and it was one of from, I think it was University of Montana or somewhere. They had published a whole bunch of them. And that's where I was like, you have like seconds, you have 3 seconds, you have 2.5 seconds. If the bear's this far, and just the reality of like, oh, wow, there's easily a false sense of security if I haven't trained to do the thing.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
it brought it home for me in a good way, because
We
no
hear
joke.
that same thing though, like backcountry skiers. People talk nowadays about backcountry
Mm.
skiing and avalanche airbags, and well, you shouldn't use those because it's a false sense of security. And well, then turn off your avalanche beacons. And we can keep
Yeah.
going down these steps.
Yeah, totally.
At the end of the day, if you ask me, outside of commercial interests, I'd probably rather have someone not train in bear spray, carry bear spray than someone, than the opposite, obviously, which is
Okay. Yeah.
someone not trained in bear spray and not using it. And it is a powerful tool in coexistence. It's again one of the things I think that's missing a little bit from Europe. The idea that you have this, that all of a sudden it takes a little bit of the fear out of the interaction, and people can respond to bears not just in that moment rationally, but
But they
kind
think
of
about it
over
ahead
their
of time.
total attitudes.
Well, it kind of goes back all the way to the beginning, which any good story circles back. The coexist comment you made at the beginning, like bear spray arguably is more of a coexist tool. If you think about, I'm now going to the woods, I'm mentally thinking about this bear, I'm mentally thinking about being aware, keeping my distance, don't leave my food out, bring my bear spray. It is much more of a coexistent mindset than a avoidance, or just simply like, oh, I'm not going to think about it, so therefore it won't happen.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Neither of them are really solutions. And again, going back to trying to find practical solutions, like we talked about it. It's easy to get heated up about wildlife. It's easy to have an
Mhm.
opinion. It's easy to love bears to death as well, which does happen on the other side of things too. Bears are little teddy bears and they're great and there's no challenges in living with them. And all we have to do is just be nice to them. I mean, that's not a solution either. Um,
No,
Practical
it's not.
steps, give people reasonable tools and reasonable opportunities, and you can take a little bit of that heat out of the room and try and have positive solutions that work for everybody.
Oh, I love it. And mic drop moment. If they weren't so damn charismatic, it would be hard. It'd be easy to look at them differently.
So there you go,
Charismatic
charismatic
megafauna.
megafauna. I mean,
I
and
love
bears are
it.
cool.
You
They
taught me
have
something. You taught me
personalities.
many new things today, but I'm going to repeat that sometime today in a conversation. I love it.
It's a good one, and we talk about wildlife as well. To have an economic solution to wildlife coexistence, we have to value wildlife. We have to both value it in, again, we talk about regulations. We talk about Alberta energy regulations. We have to value it at a personal level. We have to interact with wildlife to value it. For anyone who hasn't, take an opportunity to do some naturalistic exploration of Alberta. We've got great opportunities for it,
Mm.
and that if you want to protect anything, of course, you got to care about it. You got to create a reason to. Whatever it is, whatever your wildlife jam is, if you're a birder, if you're into moss or fungi, there's all sorts of opportunities. So for Albertans listening to your podcast, get out there. Don't let bears certainly be a reason not to, and maybe have a positive interaction with an animal, maybe even a bear, and it'd be interesting how that changes.
That is incredibly good advice. And it's so, the more you understand something, the more you connected to it, the higher chance you are of appreciating it and then ultimately caring about it. Well, and we do have such a privilege. Like the rural Alberta is amazing, and it's minutes away, no matter where you live. It's
Yeah,
accessible.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah, exactly. I mean, even the eastern
phenomenal.
province. Even the eastern
Mm.
part of the province is beautiful too. It's somewhere I don't travel to as much. I'm kind of the typical Calgary resident. I
You
don't
get sucked
really.
west. It's really easy to get sucked west. Absolutely. Jared, margosupplies.com. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, I'm assuming your website. I've been on this morning looking at all your products and browsing around. Really easy to navigate, and your products are really clear and really easily laid out. So from a user experience, step one was great. Step two, someone wants to reach out and actually have a chat with you. Really enjoyed this. Do you like LinkedIn? Do you like email? Do you have a chosen form of communication in this world of multiple ways?
Yeah. Drop us a line directly is the best way. So info@margosupplies.com. Give us a call on the number listed on our website. We're there to answer. We answer every call during business hours. I'm not, typically at 9 p.m. on the company phone. I've tried to put that habit away, although it is a small business. But yeah, drop us a line, info@margosupplies.com, or give us a call. Get engaged with us if you have a project we can help on. We're eager on it. We'll do a pitch. I'm always interested, and we are expanding. I'm looking for great staff.
Very cool. Nice.
Always interested in people with experience with wildlife already or want to work with it. Also looking for R&D staff. In particular, if you are a senior RF engineer that loves to deal with PCB design, give me a shout.
If you want to geek out on something cool, Jared's your man. Jared, I love it. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciated the depth and perspective. You gave me a handful of new ways of thinking about things today, and I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Tyler. It's been a pleasure to have me or to be here, and have a great day.
You too. There you go, man. That was fun.
Yeah,
that was great. Actually, I love that. That was a great conversation. You gave me some really good stuff to think about.
I wasn't sure where.